Bikers harass a fat farmer at a market, not knowing he's a retired Delta Force commander. Mocking laughter echoed as a group of bikers boldly blocked the path of a stout farmer at the bustling morning market. They thought it was just a harmless bit of fun, completely unaware of what lay ahead. An unimaginable twist was about to turn everything upside down. This story will keep you on the edge of your seat with its unexpected turns and intense emotions. Don't forget to follow along for more thrilling tales to come. Now, let's rewind to where it all began. The tranquil morning at Cedar Valley Market unexpectedly became the prelude to uncovering one of the largest arms trafficking networks in U.S. history. When 5 members of the biker gang, the notorious Blackstone Ridge, decided to pick on a stout farmer, they had no idea they were targeting one of the military's most dangerous combat specialists. Ben Carter, who had been hiding his true identity for the past 10 years, was a former elite Delta Force operative. The memories of his most perilous missions in modern warfare lay dormant beneath the guise of a friendly farmer in his worn work clothes. His extra weight wasn't a disguise but merely the result of post-military life. That morning, when Jake, Viper, Hayes and his gang set their sights on Ben, they couldn't have known that this action would trigger a chain of events leading to the downfall of a criminal empire and the exposure of an arms pipeline stretching from Montana to Mexico. The morning sun stretched shadows across the Cedar Valley Market as Ben's old pickup truck rolled into its usual spot. Every movement he made was slow and deliberate as he unloaded crates of fresh produce. Despite his towering frame, tipping the scale at nearly 320 pounds at 62 years old, his every motion was oddly precise. Early marketgoers had already begun to gather. Mary Collins, 72, sharp as a razor, watched him arrange heirloom tomatoes with a meticulousness that betrayed his military roots, though she didn't know that was the case. "The tomatoes look beautiful today, Ben," she commented, adjusting her shawl against the crisp morning air. "Seeds from your grandmother, I suppose?" Ben nodded, his rough hands gently positioning each tomato. "Same one she used to grow. Some things are worth preserving." Beneath his casual tone, Ben's mind was constantly scanning every detail around him. 10 years of living as a farmer couldn't erase the habits ingrained by years of service. He noted the placement of every stall, the entrances, the blind spots. A secret phone in his pocket vibrated. A short message flashed, "Cargo moving. 48 hours." He deleted it instantly, his face betraying no emotion, and resumed chatting with Mary about tomato care. At precisely 10:47 a.m., the rumble of motorcycles echoed through the mountains, momentarily silencing the market. Ben instantly recognized the distinctive sound of modified Harley-Davidsons, at least 5 of them. The Blackstone Ridge had arrived earlier than usual. Normally, they showed up only when the market was more crowded. "Those devils again," Mary muttered, her voice trembling. "Maybe just passing through," Ben replied evenly, though he knew better. Recent reports indicated they were becoming more brazen and violent. Something big was brewing, and they were making a show of force. The bikes turned into the market, forming a tight formation. Leading the group was Jake, Viper, Hayes, his leather jacket flaunting the gang's signature colors. Close behind were his trusted enforcers: Tank, the muscle-bound brute; Shade, stealthy as a shadow; Bear, whose massive size rivaled Ben's, and 2 new recruits Ben didn't recognize. They parked their bikes in a line, blocking the main entrance to the market. Viper dismounted first, his swagger that of someone accustomed to fearful stares. Ben noticed the telltale bulge beneath his jacket, a firearm, likely a new acquisition. Viper had never openly carried a weapon before. Well, Viper's voice carried across the market. "Looks like this little veggie party's in full swing." Ben continued arranging produce, each movement deliberate and methodical. He kept his head low, playing the clumsy farmer role he'd perfected, but his peripheral vision tracked every move. Tank wandered between stalls, knocking over displays. Shade disappeared behind the flower stand, positioning himself near the west exit. Bear loomed near the bikes, while the 2 newcomers mimicked the others' aggression. "Good morning, gentlemen," Ben greeted, his tone warm and inviting. "Looking for some fresh produce?" Viper's eyes flashed with irritation at the pleasant tone. He sauntered over to Ben's stall, his boots deliberately dragging across the ground to create noise. Ben observed his movements closely. There was a slight limp in his right leg, likely a fresh injury sustained within the last 48 hours. Not exactly, fat man, Viper sneered, standing at the front of the stall. We're here for what's ours. This market's on my turf, in case you hadn't heard. Time for everyone to pay up. Mary Collins clutched her shopping bag tightly, her voice trembling with anger. This is outrageous. This market has been here for 40 years. Ben interjected softly but firmly, Mary, why don't you head over to help Mrs. Chen with her flower stall? I'm sure she could use a hand. She hesitated, but there was something in Ben's tone, a quiet yet unyielding resolve, that made her nod and step away. Viper watched her leave with a disdainful smirk, then turned back to Ben. Smart move, getting the old lady out of here. Wouldn't want her to see what happens to farmers who don't understand how the world works. Ben's friendly smile remained, but his sharp eyes missed nothing: the position of each gang member, the civilians still within range of danger, and the various items around the market that could serve as improvised weapons. Everything's been fine here, he said calmly. It's been fine for generations. Tank appeared beside Viper, holding a ripe tomato in his massive hand. With a deliberate motion, crushed it, the red juice dripping through his thick fingers and onto Ben's neatly arranged display. Times are changing, old man, Tank said with a smirk. Better learn to keep up. Ben stared at the tomato juice staining the stall, keeping himself composed. 10 years in hiding had trained him to control his reactions, maintaining the posture of a submissive farmer. But today, something felt different. The gang's aggression was no longer random. It had a clear purpose. That tomato's $3 apiece, he remarked quietly. Viper let out a rough, grating laugh. Hear that, boys? This old farmer thinks he's gonna charge us. He leaned in close, his breath reeking of whiskey. His pupils were dilated, a sign of amphetamine use. The combination made him unpredictable and dangerous, but it also made him careless, oblivious to the subtle shifts in Ben's stance or the seemingly idle placement of his hands, ready to strike if necessary. The next few minutes will matter a lot, kid, Ben murmured, his voice low enough for only Viper to hear. You might want to think carefully about your next move. For a brief moment, unease flickered in Viper's eyes, but he quickly masked it with aggression. Before he could respond, Shade's voice cut through the tension. Boss, we've got company. Ben didn't need to turn to know what Shade had spotted. As planned, Chief Logan's patrol car was pulling onto the main road leading to the market. Viper straightened, his face twisting with frustration. This isn't over, fat man, he snarled. This whole market's gonna learn a hard lesson soon. The Blackstone Ridge gang mounted their bikes, the engines roaring as they sped away. Ben began cleaning up the crushed tomatoes, other vendors cautiously emerging from their hiding spots as the hum of conversation gradually returned. Mary hurried back to Ben's stall. Ben, are you all right? Those men are horrible. I'm fine, Mary, he reassured her, his movements steady as he rearranged his display. Some people only feel big when they make others feel small. But as he worked, Ben's mind raced. The gang's behavior today confirmed the intelligence he'd received. Something big was in the works. Their escalating aggression, Viper's openly carried weapon, their territorial demands, all were pieces of a puzzle he'd been assembling for months. The phone in his pocket buzzed again. Meeting at Rachel's. 1 o'clock. Ben deleted the message, his expression unchanging. The confrontation that morning would have consequences, but not the kind the Blackstone Ridge gang anticipated. They thought they'd intimidated an old farmer. In reality, they just added another piece to a decade-long operation poised to bring them down. Rachel's Cafe, nestled at the end of Cedar Valley's Main Street, had an unassuming facade that concealed far more than the best coffee in the region. Ben parked behind the building, taking note of 3 unfamiliar vehicles on his way. His trained eye immediately picked up on the telltale signs, government plates and poorly disguised antennas. The doorbell chimed softly as he stepped inside. Rachel Parker glanced up from behind the counter, her bright smile masking the true purpose of this meeting. At 27 years old, She had already proven to be an invaluable asset to the operation, with her cafe serving as the perfect front for intelligence gathering. "The usual, right?" she called out, coffee pot in hand. The cafe was nearly empty, with only 3 men scattered across the tables, feigning interest in newspapers or tapping away on laptops. "Thanks, Rachel." "Quiet morning, just the regulars," Ben replied, emphasizing the word regulars ever so slightly. Nodding, Ben grabbed his cup of coffee and moved to a corner table with a clear view of both exits. 5 minutes later, Chief Logan entered, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. He took his time getting coffee, exchanging pleasantries with Rachel before joining Ben at the table. "Heard there was trouble at the market this morning?" the sheriff began as he sat down. Ben stirred his coffee, his movements measured. "Nothing serious. Just some boys trying to act tough." "Boys packing concealed weapons," Logan replied, his tone lower. "Viper's never done that before. Times are changing." Ben continued stirring his coffee, his voice steady. "The timing this morning was precise." "Wasn't me," Logan clarified. "I got an anonymous tip, said there might be trouble at the market, even gave me the time I should swing by." Ben allowed himself a faint smile. The pieces were moving as planned. The man sitting at the far corner table folded his newspaper and approached. Eric Daniels, a field agent with the FBI, had been posing as a new insurance adjuster in town. "Mind if I join?" Daniels asked, not waiting for an answer before sitting. "Quite the morning, wasn't it? Viper's getting bolder." Ben watched as Rachel flipped the sign to closed and pulled the curtains. The other 2 customers in the cafe moved to positions near the exits, a standard protocol for secure meetings. "It's not just boldness," Ben said, his tone low but firm. "Their behavior is shifting. They're more aggressive, more coordinated. They're preparing for something big." Daniels nodded. "Our intel confirms a significant weapons shipment is moving through their territory. Biggest one yet. But there's more. Word is, there's a new player in the area." Chief Logan leaned forward. "Cartel? Someone higher up?" Daniels nodded again. "Looks like someone is consolidating independent smuggling routes, bringing them under centralized control. Blackstone Ridge is just one cog in a much larger operation." Ben thought of Viper's new weapon and the gang's territorial posturing. They're being backed, resources, support, but also tested. "What do you mean?" Logan asked. This morning wasn't random harassment. They were gauging response times, testing how local law enforcement reacts. The market is a strategic location, control of 3 main access roads, clear sight lines to the highway. Daniels slid a tablet across the table. "These are satellite images from last night. Their compound just outside town." Ben studied the images closely, his military-trained eyes picking out subtle changes. New security measures, altered building layouts, expanded parking areas. They're gearing up for a major operation, turning the compound into a distribution hub. "We've got a window," Daniels said. 2 days, maybe 3, before the shipment arrives. After that, if the intel's accurate, the entire operation will disappear under the protection of whoever's pulling the strings. Rachel reappeared with the coffee pot, refilling their cups with practiced ease. But her voice betrayed tension. "They're recruiting too. Last night at the bar, I overheard Tank talking. They're looking for people with military backgrounds, specific skill sets." Ben processed the information, connecting it with patterns he'd observed over the past months. They're becoming professionalized. Someone's turning them from a gang into a fully operational criminal enterprise. "That makes our timeline all the more critical," Daniels added. "We need to act before they complete the transition. But the operation has to target the entire network, gang, weapons, and, most importantly, evidence of whoever's backing them." Logan shook his head, discomfort evident in his expression. "My deputies aren't equipped for this." "They won't need to engage directly," Ben assured him. "But we'll need your people ready to protect the town when things heat up. The market was just the beginning. They'll escalate, trying to establish total control before the shipment arrives." "How can you be so sure?" Logan pressed. "Because that's how I would do it," Ben replied, his voice low but resolute. Secure the town, eliminate potential resistance, and safeguard supply lines. Basic military strategy. Daniels nodded slowly. The question is, how do we force them to reveal themselves before they're ready? A small smile flickered across Ben's face. They've already given us an opening. This morning's display wasn't just about testing response times. They wanted to assert dominance. They think the fat farmer will get scared and back off. And when you don't? Rachel asked, her voice tinged with concern. They'll be forced to act. Their backer will demand it. They can't afford to let one simple farmer undermine their authority. Ben's expression hardened. But we need to be cautious. These aren't just bullies anymore. They're being trained and professionalized. When they come for me, it'll be planned and deliberate. Dangerous, Daniels warned. If they're professionally trained, they might realize you're not just a farmer. Ben thought back to his earlier encounter with Viper, recalling the fleeting moment of doubt in the gang leader's eyes. That same training will work against them. They'll focus on obvious threats, law enforcement, rival gangs. No one pays attention to an overweight farmer. The meeting stretched on for another hour as they refined plans and discussed contingency scenarios. As the others departed, Ben remained seated, watching the town through the cafe's window. Cedar Valley was changing. Its quiet streets were about to become the battlefield for a much larger conflict. Rachel approached with one last cup of coffee, her voice low but laced with warning. You know they'll come after you, right? Viper won't let this morning slide. I'm counting on it, Ben replied, his tone steady, carrying the calm assurance of a man who had faced years of combat. Sometimes the best way to draw out the enemy is to make yourself look like an easy target. Driving home, Ben's mind was already racing through scenarios, each possible response meticulously planned. Blackstone Ridge thought they had intimidated a simple farmer that morning. Soon enough, they'd learn that underestimating an opponent is the deadliest mistake a warrior can make. The sun dipped lower behind the hills of Cedar Valley as Ben conducted his final checks around the farm. To any casual observer, he was just performing mundane chores, checking livestock, securing gates. His movements were slow and natural, but every action served a dual purpose: repositioning surveillance equipment, testing the security measures he had spent the past 10 years perfecting. Inside the barn, behind a cleverly concealed false wall that even professional inspections would struggle to detect, Ben entered his command center. Multiple monitors displayed feeds from hidden cameras strategically placed throughout the town. Feeds so secret that even the FBI agents weren't aware of their existence. Ben had learned long ago that the best operations are self-reliant, even with allies. His terminal lit up with an encrypted message from Daniels. Blackstone Ridge is moving. Multiple vehicles leaving the compound. Ben checked his watch. 10:47 p.m., right on schedule. They wouldn't wait long to retaliate after this morning's challenge. His bulky frame and farmer's demeanor had always been his best disguise, and now his perfect bait. No gang with any pride could allow a fat farmer to challenge their authority without consequences. The first vehicle appeared on Ben's perimeter cameras at 9:12 p.m., a black SUV coasting slowly past the farm with its headlights off. Through the grainy feed, Ben recognized shade behind the wheel, the gang's scout conducting their initial sweep. Two other vehicles followed at irregular intervals, taking up positions around the property's entrances. Ben's phone buzzed. It was a call from Rachel at the cafe. They were just here, she said, her voice low and tense. Viper and Tank were loud enough for everyone to hear. They're planning to teach you a lesson and make an example of you. What exactly did they say? Ben asked. They're coming tonight. Viper called in reinforcements from the northern chapter, at least 10 men, maybe more. She paused before continuing, her voice more strained. They talked about burning your barn, destroying livestock, making sure you can't sell at the market anymore. Ben chuckled softly. Thanks for the heads up. You should close up early and stay away from Main Street tonight. Ben, these aren't just regular thugs anymore, she warned, her concern evident. The new guys, they move differently. I'd bet anything they've got military training. Good. That'll make this more interesting. Before she could argue further, Ben ended the call. On his thermal imaging system, he tracked 10 distinct heat signatures moving through the fields surrounding the farm. Their approach was tactical, coordinated, clearly the work of former soldiers. Their movements betrayed recent combat experience. Blackstone Ridge was indeed evolving into a more professional outfit. Ben opened a locked cabinet, entering a complex code. Inside was his old tactical gear, meticulously maintained over the years despite never being used. Tonight would be different. As he suited up, his muscle memory kicked in, honed from countless past operations. The added weight of years and his bulk made the armor a snug fit, but everything was adjusted and ready. At 9:45 p.m., the prelude to the confrontation began. The sound of engines growled in the dark, motorcycles circling the property just outside visible range. A classic psychological tactic, meant to unnerve the target. Ben used the noise as cover, slipping out through a hidden exit in the barn to a prearranged observation point. Viper's voice rang out from the shadows, dripping with arrogance. No one disrespects Blackstone Ridge, especially not some fat old farmer. Through his thermal scope, Ben watched the gang split into 3 teams. They moved professionally, covering angles, maintaining communication, and advancing from one piece of cover to the next. Whoever was backing them had provided excellent training. But they had made one critical error. They thought they were dealing with an ordinary farmer. The first team breached the front door at exactly 10 p.m. Ben heard their footsteps as they carefully swept the house. The second team moved toward the barn, while the third set up a perimeter to secure the area. Viper remained in the SUV, coordinating the operation via radio. "House is empty," one voice reported. "No sign of him, but this place is wired, security cameras everywhere." Viper's response was immediate. "Find the recordings. Grab anything that could be evidence of our activity, then burn it all." Ben keyed his own radio, speaking on a secure channel to Daniels. "They've taken the bait. Start phase 2. "Deputies are 5 minutes out," Daniels replied. "Sure you don't want them closer?" "No need. This has to look real." No signs of a setup. Moving silently through the shadows, Ben's bulk seemed to vanish into the night as he approached the SUV. Viper was focused on issuing orders, oblivious to the figure creeping closer to his vehicle. "Barn's empty," another voice crackled over the radio. "No farmer, no livestock. This place looks abandoned." "Check for hidden rooms," Viper commanded. "He's gotta be somewhere." Ben reached the driver's side door. In one swift motion, he yanked it open and subdued Viper before the gang leader could react. The radio clattered to the floor with a dull thud. "Good evening," Ben murmured, locking his arm around Viper's neck in a perfect chokehold. "You might want to tell your boys to stand down before things get ugly." Viper thrashed, but Ben's technique was flawless, honed over years of special operations. "But, you're just a farmer?" Viper choked out, his voice strained. "Actually," Ben replied, tightening his grip slightly, "I'm the man who's been investigating your weapons smuggling operation for the last 10 years. And thanks to you, I've just confirmed all my suspicions about your new military connections." Viper's eyes widened as the realization hit, but before he could respond, a gunshot rang out. From the direction of the barn. "Boss," Tank's voice crackled through the radio, "you need to see this. It's a goddamn intelligence hub." Ben sighed, his voice low and calm. "Looks like we'll have to do this the hard way." In one fluid motion, Ben rendered Viper unconscious with a precise chokehold. "Daniels, start moving in, but make sure a few of them escape. This needs to look authentic." Chaos engulfed the farm as Ben systematically neutralized the Blackstone Ridge assault teams. Every movement he made was efficient, deliberate, using his formidable size as an asset rather than a hindrance. The gang's military training became their greatest weakness. They anticipated conventional tactics, not the fluid, close-quarters combat techniques of a seasoned Delta Force operative. One by one, Ben incapacitated the attackers, careful to leave an escape route. As expected, a handful fled, carrying the tale of a farmer who wasn't at all what he seemed. By the time police sirens echoed in the distance, The scene was perfectly staged. Enough evidence to justify an investigation, a few gang members on the run to spread the story, and just enough mystery surrounding Ben Carter to draw the attention of the mastermind behind it all. As dawn broke over Cedar Valley, local and state law enforcement swarmed Ben's farm, processing the aftermath of the attack. Ben sat on his porch, maintaining the appearance of a shaken but resilient farmer, all the while keeping a watchful eye on the activity. Viper had been quietly transferred to federal custody hours earlier, with his absence explained to local authorities as the gang leader fleeing the scene. 4 Blackstone Ridge members were handcuffed and loaded into police vehicles, while forensic teams cataloged evidence from the attack. Most crucially, they documented signs of a struggle, carefully staged to look like the desperate, lucky defense of a resourceful farmer. Not a single clue hinted at the calculated precision of a trained operative. Daniels approached the porch with 2 cups of coffee, his casual demeanor failing to mask the tension in his voice. 3 got away just like you planned. I overheard their panic over comms. They're scared. Ben accepted the coffee, his movements deliberately slow, projecting exhaustion. But they need to tell the story their way. It'll be more convincing that way. Our friend Viper's been surprisingly talkative during interrogation, Daniels continued. Despite his training, he couldn't handle advanced extraction techniques. He confirmed most of our suspicions about the backer, but no names. Says he's never met them face to face. All orders come through encrypted channels, using military-grade protocols. Ben watched as officers carried boxes of evidence from his command center, each item carefully curated to reveal just enough without exposing the true scale of his operation. They're probing, he said quietly, using Blackstone Ridge to test law enforcement response and identify weaknesses. Chief Logan joined them, his uniform streaked with dirt after a long night. Local reporters are here. Want me to handle the press? No need, Ben replied, shifting in his seat to appear more haggard. I need to do this myself. The story has to sell. Logan nodded, understanding the importance. They had prepared for this moment, crafting the narrative meticulously, a local farmer defending his home against a gang's attack, accidentally uncovering a larger criminal enterprise. Nothing would point to federal involvement or the long-term investigation behind the scenes. The first reporter to approach was Amy Chin from the local newspaper. Ben recognized her as a regular at Rachel's cafe. Mr. Carter, can you tell us what happened last night? She asked, holding out a recorder. Ben allowed his hands to tremble slightly, his voice a mixture of fear and indignation as he recounted the official version of events, the gang's attack, his narrow escape, and the shocking discovery of surveillance equipment in his barn. I just did what anyone would do, he concluded, his voice wavering, perfectly playing the role. This is my home, my family's land. I couldn't let them take it from me. As the morning wore on, more reporters arrived. Each time, Ben repeated the same story, reinforcing the carefully crafted narrative. A local hero standing up to a notorious gang was irresistible news, especially when the hero was just a humble farmer. By midday, Ben's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from concerned neighbors. Mary Collins brought over a casserole, fussing over him like a protective hen. The community's outpouring of support was exactly what was needed. Public backing would make it harder for Blackstone Ridge to retaliate openly. Daniels returned as the reporters departed. There's activity at their compound, he said. Vehicles coming and going. They're panicking. Good, Ben replied, rising and stretching. Their backer will have to react now. They can't ignore an exposed operation. Are you sure about the next step? Danielle's voice betrayed a note of apprehension. Once we move forward, there's no turning back. They need to believe they still have the upper hand, Ben said calmly. They'll think they're dealing with a lucky farmer who stumbled onto something big. And when they try to silence that farmer, we'll know exactly who we're up against. Inside the house, Ben activated backup systems, surveillance networks that hadn't been exposed in the raid. Multiple monitors displayed feeds from across Cedar Valley, including key areas around the Blackstone Ridge compound. The gang's activity reflected visible disarray, but beneath the surface was professional organization, vehicles moving in and out, individuals in tactical gear transporting equipment. They're cleaning house, Daniels observed, wiping anything that could tie them to their backer. Not everything, Ben countered, pointing to a screen displaying a lone building at the compound's edge. That structure's new, built to military specs. I'd bet that's their secure communications hub. We can't get a warrant for that building without exposing the intel we have, Daniels said. Ben smirked. Won't need one. Viper's escape and ridiculously easy capture will raise their suspicions. They'll assume he talked. Let's see what they move out of there tonight. The afternoon brought more visits from neighbors, giving Ben further opportunities to solidify his story. He played the role of a shaken but determined farmer to perfection, accepting casseroles and well wishes with a blend of gratitude and anxiety. As sunset approached, Rachel arrived with dinner from the cafe. Tank's girlfriend came into the cafe today, she reported quietly. Said they're bringing in some serious people, contractors, the ex-military kind. Expected, Ben replied with a nod. They'll want to assess the damage, figure out if their operation's been compromised. You mean figure out if you're really just a lucky farmer? Ben nodded again. And when they decide to look closer, they'll step right into my trap. Rachel frowned. Unless they decide to eliminate the problem immediately. They won't, Ben said with quiet certainty. Their backer will want to be sure. Killing a farmer raises questions. They'll want to control the situation, minimize any collateral damage. As night fell over Cedar Valley, Ben sat in his restored command center. The exposed equipment had been replaced, the new systems even more covert than before. The monitors displayed heightened activity at the Blackstone Ridge compound. Vehicles leaving in multiple directions, teams deploying with precise coordination. They're setting up surveillance points around the town, Daniels observed, watching the monitors. Tracking your movements, trying to determine if you really are who you appear to be. Ben began typing commands, activating secondary surveillance systems scattered throughout Cedar Valley. Good. Let them watch. Every move they make tells us more about how they operate and who's giving the orders. And if they decide to act directly against you? That's exactly what we're waiting for, Ben replied, his eyes never leaving the screens. Sometimes you have to let the enemy think they've cornered you before they reveal their true strength. As the night deepened, Ben remained at his station, monitoring every step of the adversary's movements. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Blackstone Ridge believed they were controlling a potential threat, but in reality, every action they took exposed the full extent of their operational structure. A cold gray morning settled over Cedar Valley, but Ben stuck to his routine, driving to the farmer's market as if nothing had. His stall stood empty, a reasonable sight after the events of the previous night. Yet Ben knew his absence would only deepen their suspicions. Through carefully placed hidden cameras, he observed 4 Blackstone Ridge surveillance teams stationed around the market. Their positions were professionally set, overlapping sightlines covering every entrance. However, they weren't the only observers present. Ben identified at least 3 unmarked vehicles that didn't belong to the gang, clearly the work of more sophisticated operatives, likely dispatched by the unknown backer. Mary Collins approached his empty stall, her face etched with concern. Ben, you shouldn't be here. After everything that's happened, no one would blame you for staying home, she pleaded. You can't hide forever, Mary, Ben replied, his voice trembling slightly but firm. Besides, I still have a living to make. His words were loud enough for the nearest surveillance team to hear. Ben positioned himself deliberately, ensuring they could read his lips. The image he presented was that of a stubborn, frightened farmer refusing to back down. A black SUV rolled slowly past the market gate. Ben immediately recognized the driver, one of the professional contractors Rachel had mentioned. His military demeanor was unmistakable, from his posture too. The methodical way his eyes scanned the surroundings. They're going to target you again, Mary whispered, clutching her shopping bag tightly. Everyone's talking about what happened at your farm and what they found in your barn. Ben bent down to adjust a few empty crates, his movements intentionally slow and clumsy. Maybe people should steer clear of my stall for a while. I wouldn't want anyone else getting involved. The SUV passed by again, the driver speaking into a communication device. Through the window, Ben caught the man scrutinizing his every action, searching for any sign that he was more than he seemed. His concealed earpiece crackled to life with Danielle's voice. "There's movement at the compound. They're mobilizing a response team." "Expected," Ben murmured softly as though talking to himself, a natural habit that looked convincing under scrutiny. "They want to see how I'll react if there's anything unusual." The market gradually filled with shoppers, though many kept a wary distance from Ben's stall. The story of the attack had spread quickly through town. Rumors about mysterious surveillance equipment and how a lone farmer had somehow fended off a notorious gang. Ben heard the hushed whispers, saw the cautious glances. Bridge arrived, carrying a cup of coffee, her visit appearing casual. As she handed it to him, her voice dropped to a near whisper. 3 more professionals arrived at the compound. Military contractors, judging by their gear. "Looks like they're setting up a mobile command center." Ben accepted the coffee, his hand trembling slightly, a calculated gesture to catch the watcher's attention. "They'll want to coordinate surveillance, build a behavioral analysis before they act." "You're sure about this?" Rachel asked, her voice tinged with worry. "These aren't just low-level gangsters anymore. They're trained professionals." "Exactly," Ben replied, his voice steady but quiet. "Professionally trained operatives always follow standard procedures. That makes them predictable." A motorcycle roared past, its rider a low-ranking Blackstone Ridge member, deliberately flaunting their presence to maintain the gang's facade of control. Meanwhile, their real professionals worked silently, conducting meticulous surveillance. Chief Logan's patrol car rolled by right on schedule. His presence was carefully choreographed to appear as routine, not a deliberate protection effort. He gave Ben a subtle nod, confirming that federal teams were in position, closely monitoring Blackstone Ridge's reactions. By midday, Ben began packing up his empty stall. His movements were slow and labored, resembling those of a defeated man. He could feel the increasing intensity of the surveillance, their scrutiny growing sharper with each passing moment. To them, he was just a pitiful farmer, desperately trying to cling to his routine, weighed down by fear. "There's activity at the compound," Danielle's voice came through the hidden earpiece. "They're mobilizing an advanced tactical team. Looks like they're done with passive surveillance." Ben loaded the last empty crate onto his truck, his movements deliberately uneasy. Judging by their preparations, they'll make their move tonight. Multiple teams, fully equipped, no room for error. Good. He started the truck, driving away from the market with a slightly exaggerated sense of caution, fully embodying the role of a nervous man. "Tell our teams to keep their distance. They need to believe they have full control." On the drive home, Ben noticed at least 3 vehicles taking turns tailing him. Their rotation was seamless, each handoff executed with practiced precision. These weren't gang members, they were seasoned surveillance professionals. Back at the farm, Ben pretended to check his security cameras, making sure to do so visibly in front of the windows. The observers would interpret this as the amateurish efforts of a man growing increasingly paranoid. Every move was calculated to reinforce their belief that he was merely a hapless farmer caught in something far beyond his understanding. That evening, Daniels arrived, disguised as an insurance agent checking on the damage from the previous incident. Carrying a file folder, he stepped inside and lowered his voice once the door closed. "The tactical team is ready," he reported. "They're carrying military-grade equipment, night vision goggles, signal jammers. What your surveillance system revealed has spooked their backer." Ben moved around the house, locking doors and checking windows, each action deliberate. "They'll strike shortly after midnight. Professionals usually pick that time. Minimal traffic, optimal darkness. Our team is ready. Just say the word, and they'll be here in 3 minutes." "No," Ben said firmly. "We need this to play out. From their tactics to their equipment and entry points, everything they do tonight will tell us more about who we're really up against." He paused, his eyes gleaming with confidence. "And if they decide to eliminate the threat for good," a faint smile crossed his face as he sank into an armchair, his large frame appearing relaxed. They'll learn why Delta Force is trained to turn the enemy's assumptions into their downfall. As darkness blanketed Cedar Valley, Ben performed his final security checks, playing the role of a fearful man heading to bed early. But beneath his barn, the hidden command center buzzed with activity. Monitors displayed live feeds of professional tactical teams converging on the farm. The trap was set. Now it was just a matter of waiting for them to take the bait. At exactly 11:47 p.m., all external surveillance feeds surrounding Ben's farm abruptly went offline. In the command center, he observed the advancing teams through a secured backup system. The attackers had no idea it existed. "We've lost all outside channels," Daniels reported over the secure comm line. "They're using military-grade signal jammers. This is professional work." Ben watched the thermal imaging feed, noting 12 heat signatures approaching the property. Their formation followed standard Special Forces protocols. 3 teams of 4, moving in coordinated groups, each equipped with advanced gear, night vision goggles, suppressed weapons, tactical radios. "They're not taking any chances," Ben remarked calmly as he studied their approach. "Fully outfitted, counter-surveillance measures, multiple entry angles. They've planned this thoroughly." The attackers cut power to the area, leveraging their night vision advantage while blocking all cellular signals. To anyone observing from the outside, the farm appeared completely isolated. Ben moved silently through the house, his large frame making barely a sound in the darkness. Years of special operations experience guided each step as he positioned himself strategically. Let them believe their technology gave them total control. At precisely midnight, the first team breached the front door. Their entry was flawless, synchronized, professional, reflecting extensive experience in tactical operations. They moved through the house room by room, clearing each space with meticulous precision. Living room clear. Kitchen clear. Bedroom. The soldier's voice faltered as he found the bed empty. Tension rippled through the formation. Their intelligence had indicated that Ben had gone to bed hours earlier and hadn't left the house. "Target is mobile," the team leader whispered over the comms. "Repeat, target is not in the expected position." From his thermal monitor, Ben observed the unease creeping into the teams. Professional operators despised surprises. Unexpected developments suggested faulty intel and undermined their tactical advantage. The second team reported from the barn, "Storage area clear. No additional surveillance equipment found." But there was a note of confusion in the voice. "Something's off. This place is too clean. No real farming equipment, minimal livestock supplies." Ben smirked. They were beginning to realize things weren't as they seemed. But by the time they fully understood their mistake, it would be far too late. "All teams, converge on the house," the commander's voice ordered over the comms. "Target must be hiding somewhere inside. Sweep everything, leave no stone unturned." Ben watched as the teams regrouped. They moved with the confidence of night vision dominance and coordinated training, but the tension in their movements was palpable. "The kitchen's already been cleared," a soldier reported. "Check it again," the commander barked. "Search everywhere. This doesn't add up." Moving silently behind the enemy formation, Ben used their own strategies against them. Years of training had taught him how special ops teams thought, how they moved, and where they expected threats to come from. Most importantly, he knew their blind spots. The first soldier went down silently, a precise chokehold rendering him unconscious before he could react. Ben lowered him gently to the floor, the darkness concealing the efficiency of his movements despite his imposing frame. "Johnson, report," the commander's voice demanded, tinged with unease. "Johnson, respond." Ben moved quickly, using the momentary confusion to his advantage. The second soldier never saw him coming. A calculated strike to a pressure point left him unconscious without a sound. "We have a problem," the commander said, his tone tightening. "2 men are unresponsive. Switch to thermal imaging. Find me a heat signature." But Ben had anticipated this. The house's interior temperature was carefully regulated to create a uniform thermal profile, rendering their expensive detection systems useless. One by one, the team members were systematically neutralized, each strike precise and non-lethal. These men were merely tools. Ben's true target was the person who had sent them. "Command, we have a major issue," the team leader admitted over the radio, his usual professional demeanor cracking under the strain. "The target is tactically trained. We need immediate rain." The sentence was cut off as Ben incapacitated the commander with a swift, calculated blow. The entire operation had lasted less than 4 minutes. "Daniels," Ben murmured into his concealed radio. "Move your teams in. Detain them all before their backup has time to respond." Federal agents emerged from hidden positions around the farm, swiftly apprehending the incapacitated tactical team. The unconscious operatives were loaded into unmarked vehicles, while their expensive equipment was cataloged as evidence. "Their command center will be monitoring everything," Daniels said as he entered the house, his voice low enough for only Ben to hear. "They'll know something went wrong." "Good," Ben replied, reactivating the surveillance systems and restoring the farm's perimeter. "Now they'll have to take this seriously. No more experimenting with hired contractors." "You think they'll come themselves next time?" Daniels asked. "They'll have no choice," Ben said, his eyes fixed on the monitors. Their deniable assets were just neutralized by someone they believed to be a mere farmer. "They'll need answers." As dawn broke, the last federal vehicle departed the farm, carrying the captured tactical team to a secure facility for interrogation. Ben returned to his command center, reviewing the video footage from the previous night's operation. The sophistication of the tactical team confirmed their suspicions about Blackstone Ridge's backer, a force with substantial resources and military connections. "Think any of them will talk?" Daniels asked. "They don't know anything worth hearing," Ben replied, his eyes scanning the monitors. "They're just contractors hired through shell companies. But their equipment, their tactics, everything about this operation tells us more about who we're really up against." The soft morning light spread over Cedar Valley, erasing all traces of the previous night's raid. Ben drove into town, his every move calculated to project the image of a worried but determined man. In a small town like this, secrets didn't stay hidden for long. When Ben arrived at Rachel's cafe, it was unusually crowded. Locals huddled in small groups, whispering about the strange noises and unmarked vehicles seen near his farm. The town's rumor mill was working exactly as expected. "You look tired, Ben," Rachel remarked as she poured him a coffee, her voice loud enough for nearby patrons to overhear. "Rough night." "Couldn't sleep," Ben replied, letting fatigue seep into his voice. "Thought I heard noises outside. Probably just stress after everything that's happened." His words sparked a new wave of murmurs. Through carefully planted surveillance devices, Ben monitored the calls leaving the cafe, including 3 directed to Blackstone Ridge contacts. Their communication network was crude but effective. Daniels entered the cafe, sitting across from Ben as if it were a casual breakfast meeting. "Last night's team has been processed," he said quietly. "Professional contractors, just as we thought. Mostly former Special Forces operatives. They were hired through a complex network of shell companies." "Any direct links?" Ben asked. "Not yet. But their equipment." Daniels lowered his voice further. "Some of it's classified tech. Stuff that shouldn't be accessible on the civilian market. Whoever's behind this has serious military connections." Ben noticed a black sedan pass the cafe for the 3rd time, its tinted windows concealing the occupants. "Not Blackstone Ridge," he observed, deliberately staring into his coffee with a tense expression. "That's likely the backer's surveillance team. They're analyzing my behavior after last night's failed operation. They're changing tactics," he continued, his tone calm. "Last night's team was professional but predictable. Next time, they'll send something different." His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from FBI agents. "Significant activity at Blackstone Ridge compound. High-level personnel on site. Someone important has taken direct control." Mary Collins bustled into the cafe, her timing impeccable. Known as the town's most enthusiastic gossiper, she would help spread the next phase of the narrative they were constructing. "Ben Carter, you ought to call someone for help," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough to silence the room. Those strange lights and noises from your farm last night, half the town's talking about it. Ben allowed his hand to tremble slightly as he set down his coffee. His voice was soft and measured. Just some trespassers, probably. Nothing serious. Nothing serious? Mary's voice rose, ensuring everyone in the cafe could hear. Mary Chen said she saw men wearing night vision goggles, and Bill at the gas station swears he heard helicopters. The cafe fell silent. All eyes turned to Ben. He noticed a few patrons subtly pulling out their phones, recording the conversation. Let them listen, let them report back to their handlers. Mrs. Collins, Ben said, carefully choosing his words, it might be better not to spread stories like that. These are dangerous people. His phone vibrated again with a new message from the command team. Satellite images showed a private jet had landed at a small airport outside town. The enemy was no longer working through intermediaries. There's movement at the compound, Daniel said quietly over the earpiece. They're deploying teams into town. This is different from before. They're moving openly, deliberately flaunting their strength. Ben gave a slight nod, his face betraying no emotion. Blackstone Ridge had clearly been ordered to reassert control, staging public displays of power. Their backer needed to restore fear within the community, deterring anyone else from following the example of a farmer daring to stand against them. Right on cue, the rumble of motorcycles echoed outside the cafe. These weren't the gang's usual members. These riders moved with military precision, their formation flawless. New personnel had been brought in to professionalize the operation. They're watching your every move, Rachel murmured as she refilled Ben's coffee. I've spotted at least 4 surveillance teams from here, maybe more. Good, Ben replied softly, almost to himself. Let them watch. Every reaction reveals more about how they think. The morning passed with carefully calculated actions. Ben went to the bank, the feed store, and the post office, chores befitting a farmer. In truth, he was observing Blackstone Ridge's new operatives. Their presence was designed to intimidate and overwhelm but stayed within the bounds of legality. At the feed store, a new figure appeared, a man in an expensive suit, conspicuously out of place. Every movement he made radiated the authority of a military commander. General Stevens, Danielle's voice came through Ben's earpiece. Former head of Special Operations Command. Retired under suspicious circumstances 3 years ago. No official ties to any private military company, but his name keeps showing up in intelligence reports on arms smuggling. Ben pretended not to notice the general, maintaining his role as a nervous farmer. But he mentally cataloged every detail, the way Stevens moved, the subtle hand signals to hidden security teams, the way his eyes assessed threats. This was a man well-versed in commanding special forces. Back at the farm, Ben reviewed the day's surveillance data. The Blackstone Ridge compound was evolving rapidly. Professional security teams had replaced gang members in key positions. Their backer had stepped in directly, transforming a criminal biker gang into something far more dangerous. They'll make a move soon, Daniels remarked, watching the live feeds. Stevens isn't the type to sit on surveillance for long. He's a man of action. How long do we have? Ben asked. Judging by their activity, I'd say tonight. Multiple teams, heavily armed. They're done playing games. Good. Ben nodded, his expression resolute. Time to show them what happens when they bring conventional military tactics to a fight that doesn't follow traditional rules. Dusk fell over Cedar Valley, bringing an uneasy silence. Blackstone Ridge's new professional operatives had established a visible perimeter around the town. Their presence was both overt and menacing. Locals hurried home, leaving the streets eerily empty before. Night fully descended. The message was clear. This town now had new management. From his command center, Ben monitored General Stevens orchestrating operations from the gang's compound. The scale of the operation had grown significantly. Satellite imagery revealed multiple tactical teams, advanced communication systems, and even armored vehicles disguised as civilian trucks. They're not even trying to hide anymore, Daniels remarked over the secure comm line. Stevens is playing to his strengths, Ben replied, his eyes fixed on the monitors. Conventional military tactics, overwhelming force, superior technology, controlled escalation, everything that made him successful in war. And everything that will lead to his failure here. Stevens's tactical teams moved with precision, establishing observation posts throughout the town. Their equipment was cutting-edge, thermal imaging systems, signal jammers, and advanced counter-surveillance measures. But Ben had spent a decade preparing for this exact scenario. At exactly 10:47 p.m., everything was in place. Stevens made his first move. Every phone in Cedar Valley received the same text message simultaneously. For your safety, please remain indoors until further notice. Law enforcement is conducting a special operation in your area. Ben allowed himself a faint smile. The wording of the message was perfect, formal enough to ensure compliance, yet vague. Enough to avoid legal repercussions. Stevens was leveraging his military experience to establish psychological control over the battlefield. There are multiple teams converging on your position, Daniels reported over the earpiece. This is different from last night. No attempts at subtlety. Full tactical gear, weapons out in the open. Through his surveillance network, Ben counted 21 operatives advancing on the farm. Their movements spoke of extensive military training but also revealed their commander's mindset. Stevens was treating this as a conventional military operation, overwhelm the target with superior force. They're using outdated infantry tactics, Ben observed, watching the teams position themselves. Standard protocols for urban warfare. Stevens hasn't adapted to civilian dynamics. The first group reached the outer boundary of the farm at 9:15 p.m. Unlike the previous night, they moved with an air of confidence and authority. Their encrypted communications were loud enough to make it clear. They wanted Ben to know they were coming. Ben Carter, the commander's voice boomed from a specialized loudspeaker. This is your only warning. Exit your home with your hands up. You have 60 seconds to comply. Ben activated his counter-surveillance measures, a system that appeared crude but was far more sophisticated than it looked. He wanted Stevens to believe he was dealing with a farmer using rudimentary defenses. Their plan is getting slightly more complex, Ben murmured to Daniels as he typed quickly, initiating preset electronic countermeasures. The tactical team's communications began to glitch, disrupting their coordination. Their encrypted radios still worked, but with degraded quality, enough to create just the right amount of confusion to disrupt their rhythm, all while appearing to be random interference. Target is non-compliant, the commander reported, moving to breach positions. Through his thermal imaging, Ben watched the teams prepare for a coordinated assault. Their stances followed textbook military doctrine. Multiple entry points, overlapping fields of fire, each step precise and methodical, exactly as Stevens would have trained them. They're about to attack, Daniels warned. Do you want to call in backup? Not yet, Ben replied, moving silently through hidden passages in the house. Stevens needs to witness this failure firsthand. He needs to understand this isn't a simple security problem. At 9:30 p.m., the assault began. Simultaneous explosions shattered doors and windows as the tactical teams stormed the house. Their breach was flawless, and their room-clearing techniques were without error. Everything unfolded according to military doctrine, and every bit of it played directly into Ben's plan. The first group encountered simple but effective traps, non-lethal, designed to disorient. Thick smoke poured through the vents, obscuring their vision. Strobe lights disrupted their night vision gear. Each countermeasure appeared hastily improvised, as if by a desperate farmer. What the hell is this? One operative shouted as his team lost communication and broke formation. Nothing in the intel mentioned defenses like this. Moving through the smoke, Ben's bulky frame was eerily silent amidst the chaos. Years of Delta Force experience had taught him to weaponize confusion. One by one, the team members were incapacitated with precision strikes. Every attack was orchestrated to appear accidental, a panicked farmer getting lucky against highly trained soldiers. Nothing about it suggested the work of a professional operative. Commander, we've lost formation. The leader's voice crackled over the radio, the professionalism in his tone beginning to falter. The target, The target is engaging multiple operatives simultaneously. In the command center at the Blackstone Ridge compound, General Stevens watched the tactical feed, his face tightening with concern. His flawless military operation was unraveling into chaos. His highly trained teams were being systematically neutralized by a target that should have been an easy capture. "Pull back," he ordered abruptly. "Regroup at Rally Point Alpha." But Ben wasn't finished. As the teams attempted to retreat, they faced additional complications. Armored vehicles refused to start. Communication systems experienced critical interference at pivotal moments. Each setback appeared random, yet every failure was the result of Ben's meticulous planning. By the time the operation completely unraveled, 13 of Stevens's elite operatives lay unconscious, their expensive equipment scattered across Ben's farm. Every injury appeared to result from self-defense. Every tactical failure looked like desperate luck. "Daniels," Ben said quietly over the secure comms. "Bring your team in." Same as last night, clean extraction, no federal traces left behind. Agents moved swiftly, removing the incapacitated operatives from the area. From a distance, through his surveillance system, Ben observed Stevens's reaction. The general's face was a mask of restrained fury. He understood that his conventional military tactics had utterly failed. "Next time, he'll adapt," Daniels noted as the last federal vehicle departed. "That's what we're waiting for," Ben replied, beginning to reset his defenses. Every adjustment he makes will reveal more about his organization. Every change in tactics will tell us more about their true operations. The following morning brought a different atmosphere to Cedar Valley. The professional operatives of Blackstone Ridge had withdrawn from visible positions. The armored vehicles and tactical teams were gone, replaced by unmarked sedans gliding through the streets. The drivers wore expensive suits, no longer clad in tactical gear. From Rachel's cafe, Ben watched Stevens's shift in strategy, from overt military intimidation to a more refined, subtle form of surveillance. Private security contractors now blended into the civilian population. Daniels slid into the seat across from Ben, his expression grim. "They're digging into your background," he said quietly. "Deep checks, interviewing locals, trying to figure out who you really are." "Good." Ben let his hand tremble slightly as he raised his coffee cup, maintaining the image of a nervous farmer. "The records will confirm my story. 10 years of carefully constructed history, all leading to exactly what they expect to find." Through the cafe window, Ben spotted one of Stevens's investigators speaking with Mary Collins outside the grocery store. Her love of gossip made her a perfect source, and her extensive knowledge of local history lent credibility to Ben's cover story. "Your background will hold," Daniels agreed. "But Stevens is not just focused on you anymore. He's investigating everyone who's interacted with you, looking for connections that don't fit." Ben noticed a suited man photographing license plates in the parking lot. Their surveillance was becoming more comprehensive and professional. Stevens no longer underestimated his adversary. Rachel approached their table with the coffee pot, her movements casual but her tone tense as she refilled their cups. "They were asking a lot of questions at the bank this morning," she whispered. "Flashed badges, claimed to be federal inspectors investigating financial fraud." "Stevens is good," Ben acknowledged quietly. "Using a legitimate cover story, official credentials, makes it impossible for people to refuse cooperation without raising suspicion." The cafe door jingled as two more investigators entered. Their professional attire couldn't hide their military bearing. They took seats at the counter, ordered coffee, but kept discreet eyes on Ben's table. "They've found something," Daniels warned, checking his phone. "Satellite feeds show increased activity at the compound. More vehicles arriving, encrypted communications spiking." Ben caught snippets of conversation from the counter. The investigators were discussing property records, business licenses, and trying to piece together his financial history. Stevens was thorough, hunting for any anomaly in Ben's carefully crafted cover story. "Sir," one investigator said quietly into a concealed microphone, "the target's business transactions show irregular patterns. Monthly purchases don't align with reported farm output." Ben had anticipated this. His financial records were meticulously calibrated, enough small inconsistencies to raise questions, but nothing indicating illegal activity. Just enough to make them dig deeper. "They're cross-referencing your military records," Daniels added, "trying to find any sign of prior service that would explain your tactical capabilities." "They won't find anything," Ben said, his tone calm and assured. "My Delta Force file was erased years ago. The official databases will show exactly what we want them to see." The morning unfolded with deliberate precision. Ben visited the bank, the post office, and the feed store, routine errands for a farmer. In reality, he was giving Stevens's team opportunities to observe his habits. Every location, every interaction, had been meticulously prepared over the years to reinforce his cover identity. By midday, a new figure emerged. A woman in a perfectly tailored business suit entered City Hall. Her badge identified her as a federal prosecutor investigating organized crime. Her questions about Ben Carter were direct, professional, and carefully framed to seem like part of a broader RICO investigation. Laura Harris, Daniels identified through the secure comms. Former military intelligence, now working for private security firms. Her specialty is uncovering deep cover operatives. Driving past City Hall, Ben noticed Harris's unmarked car, a telltale sign that Stevens was escalating. He had brought in specialists trained to expose covert operations. The game was becoming more complex. "They're expanding their investigation," Daniels warned. "Checking records in neighboring counties, looking for patterns or connections we might have missed." "Let them look," Ben replied, parking at the agricultural supply store. "Every record they find, every connection they trace back, reinforces the story we want them to believe." But Stevens wasn't stopping there. By mid-afternoon, new players appeared in Cedar Valley, men in expensive suits meeting with local business owners, offering investment opportunities and development deals. Stevens was applying economic pressure, trying to isolate Ben by buying influence within the community. "Smart move," Ben observed, watching one of the suited men negotiate with the local hardware store owner. Using legitimate business connections to establish control, much harder to resist than outright intimidation. The pressure escalated throughout the day. Bank employees suddenly discovered irregularities in Ben's accounts. Building inspectors showed up at the farm, citing code violations that required immediate attention. Each action was legal, professional, and impossible to prove as harassment. "They're trying to squeeze you financially," Daniels noted, "forcing you to make a mistake that exposes connections they can follow." Ben smirked as he drove back to the farm. That evening, Stevens still believed he was dealing with a farmer accidentally entangled in something sensitive. He searched for cracks in Ben's story, weaknesses to exploit and force him into revealing information. But Stevens was asking the wrong questions. He was too focused on uncovering who Ben really was to notice what was unfolding right in front of him. As night fell over Cedar Valley, Ben reviewed the day's surveillance data. Stevens's investigators had been thorough, professional, exactly what you'd expect from former military intelligence operatives. They had found precisely the irregularities Ben had deliberately left for them to discover. "They'll make a move soon," Daniels predicted over the secure line. "This level of deep investigation always leads somewhere. Trust that." Ben activated his security systems, preparing for the next phase. Stevens thought he was gathering intelligence for a precision strike. In reality, he was walking into a campaign that had been in the making for 10 years. Throughout the night, Stevens's investigators worked tirelessly, analyzing data, connecting dots, and constructing a profile of Ben Carter. But the picture they were piecing together was deliberately misleading, guiding them straight to where Ben wanted them to go. The first sign of Stevens's new strategy came at dawn. Through his surveillance network, Ben observed trucks arriving at the Blackstone Ridge compound. They were no longer military vehicles but commercial delivery trucks, each carrying equipment that was soon deployed across Cedar Valley, surveillance cameras disguised as infrastructure devices, signal monitoring equipment hidden in ordinary installations. "They're building a surveillance network," Daniels reported. "Professional-grade equipment, military protocols." Stevens is turning the whole town into an observation post, Ben noted, studying the installation patterns as he prepared for his usual morning routine. Stevens was meticulous, creating overlapping coverage zones to track every movement in town. But what caught Ben's attention were the deliberate gaps in the network, specific areas left uncovered. He's creating corridors, Ben observed, scrutinizing the layout. Guiding movement along predictable paths, standard urban control tactics. The town began to change. New security personnel appeared at local businesses, wearing badges from private contractors and carrying themselves with professional demeanor, a stark contrast to the crude intimidation tactics previously employed by Blackstone Ridge. Stevens was establishing what appeared to be legitimate checkpoints throughout Cedar Valley. At the farmers' market, Ben set up his stall under the watchful gaze of numerous surveillance cameras. Mary Collins approached, her voice tinged with unease as usual. "Ben, have you noticed all these new security measures?" she asked softly, her tone quieter than usual. "They're saying it's because of increased criminal activity in the area. Probably just to keep everyone safe," Ben replied, maintaining the facade of a worried farmer. "But it does seem like a lot of security for a small town like this." His words were picked up by Stevens's surveillance system, just as planned. Let them hear the anxiety in his voice, see the tension in his gestures. Every action carefully reinforced the assumptions they had about him. By mid-morning, Laura Harris made her move. The former military intelligence officer approached Ben's stall with a demeanor that was professional yet quietly menacing. "Mr. Carter," she greeted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'd like to have a word about your farm operations. Some regulatory issues have caught our attention." Ben let his hands tremble slightly as he rearranged some crates of vegetables. "I've always kept my paperwork in order, ma'am. Everything's properly licensed." "Indeed," she replied, her sharp eyes scrutinizing him closely. "Your documentation is very thorough, almost too thorough, one might say. As if someone had spent years crafting a very specific narrative." The veiled threat was unmistakable. Stevens's team had uncovered the planted irregularities in Ben's past, exactly as planned. Now, they were testing his reaction, watching how he handled direct pressure. "I'm just a farmer," Ben insisted, his tone a mix of desperation and nervousness. "I don't know anything about complex paperwork or regulations. I'm just trying to work the land my father left me." Harris's next move was unexpected but revealing. She pulled out a folder containing official financial records. "Your banking transactions show some interesting patterns," she said coolly. "Fertilizer purchases don't align with reported crop yields. Equipment expenses far exceed what's typical for a small farm like yours." Small discrepancies, but enough to paint a suspicious picture. Ben maintained his tense demeanor, but internally he analyzed Harris's tactics. She was skilled, using official records and legitimate concerns to exert pressure. Stevens had chosen his personnel well. "Agricultural equipment is expensive these days," Harris remarked, her tone detached but professional. "You had to take out loans to upgrade your systems, didn't you?" "Yes, loans," Ben replied, his voice shaking as though cornered. "Loans from banks with curious ties to foreign entities," Harris continued, her smile as sharp as a knife. "You understand we'll need to conduct a thorough audit. Standard procedure whenever financial irregularities like this arise." Through his concealed earpiece, Danielle's voice came through. "They're moving teams around town. Whatever Stevens is planning, it's leading to something big." Ben watched as Harris walked away, noting how other agents continued to monitor his position. Stevens was tightening the noose, using legal, financial, and regulatory pressure to limit Ben's options. By the afternoon, Stevens's strategy became clear. Local suppliers suddenly reported issues with Ben's accounts. The bank froze his assets pending investigation. Building inspectors arrived at the farm, citing numerous violations that required immediate correction. "They're isolating you," Daniels noted. "Cutting off resources, limiting options. Classic intelligence tactics." "Stevens thinks he's found my weakness," Ben replied calmly, keeping his composure. "Financial pressure, legal threats, things an ordinary farmer wouldn't know how to handle. He's expecting me to slip up, to reveal connections while trying to fix these problems. The pressure continued to mount throughout the day. Ben noticed the townspeople growing more distant, worried about being associated with him. Stevens's agents had been careful to spread rumors about potential criminal investigations, amplifying the community's unease. But the most intriguing development came at dusk. An unmarked truck arrived at the Blackstone Ridge compound. Satellite imagery showed the vehicle was heavily shielded, concealing its cargo. Communications traffic just spiked, Daniels reported. High-level encryption, military-grade protocols. Something big is being coordinated. Ben reviewed the surveillance data, analyzing the patterns emerging at Blackstone Ridge. The gang's usual members were gradually being replaced with professional operatives. The compound was transforming into something far more sophisticated. Stevens is setting up for the endgame, Ben observed. He believes this pressure campaign will either force me to flee or make a desperate move. Either way, he's hoping I'll reveal something he can use. And when you don't? Daniels asked. That's when we'll see his real plan. As night fell over Cedar Valley, Ben Carter, the seemingly desperate farmer, continued to feign struggle under mounting pressure. But beneath the surface, every move was calculated, contingency plans ready. Stevens thought he was laying a trap a decade in the making. What he didn't realize was that he was stepping into another trap, one that had been waiting for him just as long. The unmarked truck arriving at dusk was the piece Ben had been waiting for. His specialized scanning network, deployed across Cedar Valley, detected a unique radiation signature from the cargo inside. Confirmed, Ben relayed over the secure comms. Stevens isn't just trafficking weapons. He's moving prototype military tech, possibly experimental weapons systems. Dawn brought new developments. Rachel Harris appeared at City Hall with a team of forensic auditors. Their credentials were impeccable and their investigation focused on local business connections. Every financial inquiry eventually led back to Ben's farm, weaving a growing web of suspicion. They're building a RICO case, Daniels said, watching from a concealed position in the coffee shop. Using legitimate federal investigations to justify increased surveillance and pressure. Ben maintained his guise as a worried farmer, driving through town and noting Stevens's agents stationed at critical locations. The overarching strategy was sophisticated, multiple layers of legal authority working to restrict movement and gather intelligence. A report from Ben's security system confirmed. Connection to Santiago cartel verified. Weapons shipments are moving north along established routes. The Blackstone Ridge compound is being prepped as a distribution hub. The final pieces were falling into place. Stevens wasn't just trafficking weapons. He was building a sophisticated smuggling network, using legitimate businesses and criminal organizations as cover. Blackstone Ridge was just one component of a much larger operation. At the farmers' market, Ben noticed new faces among the morning shoppers. Professional observers, their seemingly casual behavior belied by the disciplined demeanor of those with military training. Mr. Carter, Harris's voice rang out as she approached his stall, her professional demeanor steady as ever. Our investigation has uncovered some interesting patterns in your equipment purchases, specifically items that could be used to modify certain machinery. Ben let his hands tremble slightly as he rearranged crates of vegetables. Farm equipment needs regular maintenance, ma'am. Nothing unusual about ordering replacement parts. These modifications are different, Harris replied, placing transaction records in front of him. They align with patterns we've seen in arms trafficking operations, specifically converting civilian vehicles for military applications. The implication was clear. Stevens's team had found exactly what they were meant to find, evidence suggesting Ben's farm was a front for weapons modifications. Every discovery was drawing them deeper into a narrative constructed over 10 years. I don't know anything about weapons, Ben insisted, his voice carrying just the right note of desperate denial. I'm just trying to keep my father's farm running. But Harris wasn't finished. She produced satellite images showing vehicle movements around his farm, with timing patterns suggesting coordinated activity. The evidence was mounting, all pointing toward conclusions Stevens's team had been guided to reach. Teams are converging on the compound, Daniels reported over the secure comms. Heavy equipment is being moved undercover. It looks like Stevens's plan is accelerating. By afternoon, Ben drove home, noting the surveillance network tracking his every move. Every camera, observation post, and monitoring device was perfectly positioned to create a comprehensive net, one designed to catch any attempt to move weapons or contact outside forces. In the secret command center, Ben reviewed the latest intelligence. The Blackstone Ridge compound had transformed into a sophisticated operational hub with secure communications systems, weapons storage, and distribution facilities. Stevens isn't just selling guns, Daniels updated over the secure comms. He's building a private military arsenal. As night deepened, Stevens's strategy became more apparent. His operatives systematically isolated Ben, using legitimate investigations to cut off his resources and support. This pressure campaign was meant to force him to flee or act recklessly. But the shipments provided a more compelling story. Stevens wasn't merely stockpiling artillery, he was acquiring specific systems, pointing to something far larger than profit. Track the end users, Ben instructed Daniels. See where these weapons are actually going. The findings were clear. Many shipments traced back to private military companies, security contractors, and specialized training facilities. He's building an army, Daniels realized, using Blackstone Ridge and other gangs as a front for a much larger operation. As darkness cloaked Cedar Valley, Ben noticed increased activity at the compound. Under the cover of night, specialized equipment was being transported in communications systems, tactical gear, and technology indicative of preparations for significant operations. Stevens thinks he's identified a security threat, Ben observed, studying thermal imagery. He's accelerating, trying to neutralize what he perceives as a risk to his plans. And when he acts against you? Daniels asked. That's when we'll know what he's truly building. The breakthrough came at midnight. Ben's surveillance system detected encrypted signals emanating from the Blackstone Ridge compound. These communications were too sophisticated for a typical criminal organization. We've got data, Ben announced over the secure line. Weapons manifests, deployment schedules, training protocols. The intelligence painted a grim picture. Blackstone Ridge was merely one node in a vast network, with each criminal organization carefully chosen and positioned. Stevens was leveraging gang territories to mask high-level military operations, constructing something capable of operating outside formal oversight. As dawn arrived, the pressure intensified. Rachel Harris appeared at Ben's farm with a team of federal auditors, ostensibly investigating agricultural regulations. Interesting modifications to your irrigation systems, Mr. Carter, Harris remarked, examining blueprints with a sharp eye. Your energy consumption doesn't match typical agricultural needs. Ben maintained his nervous facade while noting how her team photographed specific areas of the farm. They were searching for evidence of weapons modification, finding precisely the breadcrumbs he had carefully planted over the years. Farming these days requires more advanced tech, he explained, his voice strained. I've had to upgrade a few systems to stay competitive. Yes, upgrades, Harris replied with a cold smile, her gaze lingering on reinforced storage buildings. These barns seem a bit excessive for storing grain. Through his hidden surveillance network, Ben watched Stevens's reaction to the investigation. He had deployed additional teams around Cedar Valley, positioning them for immediate response to any attempts to move weapons or equipment. Multiple vehicles just arrived in town, Daniels reported. Professional contractors, military-grade gear disguised as civilian equipment. Stevens is preparing for something big, Ben replied. The picture was becoming clearer. Harris's investigation was building a legal framework to justify more aggressive actions, while Stevens's teams set up positions to encircle the town. He was laying the groundwork for a large-scale coordinated operation. Driving to Rachel's cafe, Ben could feel the surveillance net tracking his every move. Every camera, observation post, and monitoring device was actively reporting his location. Stevens was ensuring Ben couldn't escape whatever was about to happen. They found the secret room in your barn, Rachel whispered. as she set a coffee cup on the table. "The one you prepared for them to find. Harris's team is processing it now." The secret room was a meticulously crafted decoy, appearing as a clumsy attempt to hide weapons modification activities. Everything inside was designed to confirm Stevens's suspicions about what he was dealing with. Satellite imagery shows increased activity at 3 additional locations, Daniels reported over the secure channel. The patterns are identical to the Blackstone Ridge compound. Stevens is activating other cells in his network. Ben studied the data on his secure tablet. Stevens's operation was far more extensive than he had initially anticipated. Each site exhibited signs of advanced military infrastructure hidden beneath a criminal veneer. "This isn't just a weapons depot," Ben observed, scrutinizing the layouts. "These are forward bases. Stevens is positioning assets for some kind of coordinated action." That afternoon, Rachel Harris arrived with a federal cease and desist order. Ben's farm operations were officially suspended, pending investigation into alleged agricultural violations. "We'll need to conduct a more thorough examination of your property," she stated, her tone professional but laden with pressure. "Our preliminary findings suggest potential violations of multiple federal statutes." Ben let his hands tremble slightly as he accepted the paperwork, maintaining the facade of a farmer watching his life's work crumble. Internally, he was meticulously analyzing every detail of the larger campaign unfolding around him. Stevens's teams were methodically establishing a perimeter around Cedar Valley, using legitimate law enforcement activities as a cover for what resembled a military-style siege. "Track the shipment schedules," Ben instructed Daniels. "Look for patterns in the movement of weapons." Stevens isn't just stockpiling artillery, he's positioning specific systems for a coordinated operation. The analysis was clear. Each site in Stevens's network was receiving tailored shipments of weapons and equipment. Viewed collectively, the deliveries pointed to preparations for something far more sophisticated than ordinary smuggling. "He's building autonomous combat units," Daniels deduced. "Each location is equipped like a self-sustaining military force capable of operating independently." As night fell, activity at the Blackstone Ridge compound intensified. Under the cover of darkness, more specialized equipment arrived. Tactical systems, communication devices, and technologies essential for coordinated military operations. "Stevens knows we're watching," Ben said, observing the thermal imagery. "He's showing us just enough to draw specific conclusions. The question is, what's he hiding behind this performance?" The answer came through decrypted signals. Beneath the weapons trafficking and gang activities, Stevens was orchestrating something far more dangerous: a private military command structure operating outside government oversight. "This goes far beyond arms dealing," Ben relayed through the secure channel. "Stevens is building infrastructure for independent military operations. The real question is, who's he preparing to fight?" As midnight passed, Ben Carter, outwardly a desperate farmer fighting to save his livelihood, continued to play his role convincingly. But behind the carefully maintained facade, a far more intricate operation was unfolding. Stevens believed he was managing a security breach while preparing for his larger plan. In reality, he was unwittingly exposing the very network Ben had spent a decade unraveling. By 3 a.m., Ben's decryption program finally broke through the encrypted communications from the compound. Weapon shipments, training facilities, command structures. It all pointed to preparations for a specific objective. "Stevens isn't just building a private army," Ben noted, scanning the decoded files. "He's gearing up for military contracts, involving multiple governments. A private force operating beyond oversight and accountability." Dawn brought new developments. Rachel Harris returned, this time accompanied by federal agents carrying a warrant to confiscate the farm's equipment for examination. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mr. Carter," she urged as officers began loading equipment onto trucks. "Cooperate, and things might go easier for you." Ben maintained the appearance of reluctant compliance, but his mind was focused on analyzing the inspection team's movements. These weren't ordinary law enforcement personnel. Their precision and coordination revealed clear military training. They're looking for weapon modification equipment, Daniels reported over the secure channel. But more importantly, they're establishing a pattern of legitimate activity to justify their growing presence in the area. The morning unfolded with calculated precision. Stevens's teams continued their surveillance while Harris's investigation provided a legal pretext for what were clearly militarized operations across Cedar Valley. Some new trucks just arrived at the compound, Rachel said softly, setting a cup of coffee down beside Ben. Her eyes followed the vehicles in the distance. They're different from before. They look like specialized transport units. Stevens is moving into the next phase, Ben replied quietly. The weapons and training were just the groundwork. Now he's bringing in the real equipment. By noon, satellite images confirmed Ben's analysis. The Blackstone Ridge compound was receiving advanced military hardware, not just weapons but command and control systems, electronic warfare equipment, and everything necessary for autonomous combat operations. Ben gave the order to Daniels. Check the other locations in his network. Look for similar deliveries, signs of simultaneous preparation. The pattern became unmistakable. Each site in Stevens's operation was being upgraded simultaneously, evolving from simple weapons depots into forward operating bases. Stevens was positioning assets for a specific, urgent plan. Harris was back at the farmers' market later that morning, armed with evidence of financial irregularities, insinuating connections to international arms dealers. Her investigation provided the perfect cover story for whatever Stevens was planning. These transactions, she said, pointing at documents spread across Ben's stall, display typical patterns of money laundering. Combined with the equipment we've already seized, they paint a very interesting picture. Ben examined the financial records, maintaining a facade of concern. The evidence was thorough, professional, and entirely staged. Stevens's team had crafted a seamless paper trail to imply criminal activity. I can explain, he protested weakly, letting a note of fear creep into his voice. The equipment modifications, the unusual transactions, all of it, it's for legitimate agricultural purposes. But more revealing than Harris's investigation was the activity Ben observed throughout the town. Stevens's teams were establishing precise patrol patterns, creating security zones that could easily transition into areas of military control. They're preparing for population control, Ben reported through the secure channel, setting up the infrastructure to contain and isolate quickly. The implications were grave. Stevens wasn't just building combat units. He was preparing to take over the entire area, using criminal organizations as a smokescreen for military operations. As night fell, Ben's surveillance network detected new signals emanating from the compound, encrypted communications, weapon tests, and specialized training exercises. Stevens's operation was accelerating toward a specific deadline. There's something, Daniels reported. We've intercepted fragments about a demonstration. Stevens is preparing to showcase his capabilities to potential clients. Ben reviewed the intelligence while maintaining his role as a farmer under mounting legal pressure. The pattern was becoming clearer. Cedar Valley wasn't just an operational base, it was about to become a proof of concept. He's planning to take over the town, Ben realized, to demonstrate to potential clients how his private military force can control a population without formal oversight. The night brought heightened activity at Stevens's facilities. Under the cover of darkness, specialized equipment was brought in, not just weapons, but systems designed for urban warfare and population control. He knows we're watching, Ben observed, studying thermal imagery. He's revealing just enough for us to draw the conclusions he wants. But the question is, what's he hiding? The answer came through decoded communications. Behind the arms trafficking and gang operations, Stevens was constructing a private military command structure, one designed to operate entirely outside government oversight. This is far beyond arms trafficking, Ben reported over the secure channel. He's building infrastructure for independent military operations. But the question remains, who is he preparing to fight? As dawn broke over Cedar Valley, the transformation of the town became increasingly apparent. Stevens's security teams established new checkpoints on every road leading in and out of the town, claiming it was part of an ongoing federal investigation. Potential clients are arriving, Daniels reported through the secure line. Private planes landing at 3 regional airports. They appear to be military representatives from various countries, all traveling under diplomatic cover. Ben observed the operation from his farm, noting how Stevens's teams had positioned themselves strategically throughout the town. Stevens wasn't just showcasing weapons, he was demonstrating how to occupy and control a civilian population without attracting international attention. Harris's investigation provides the perfect cover, Ben noted, watching as another federal team arrived at his property. Any irregular activity can be explained as part of legitimate law enforcement operations. Harris approached his house, her demeanor professional but tinged with triumph. "Mr. Carter," she announced, "we've uncovered evidence requiring immediate action. Your property is being temporarily seized under federal authority." The seizure operation was seamless. Agents secured the buildings, inventoried the equipment, and established a perimeter that conveniently shielded key areas of the town. Through his surveillance network, Ben watched as Stevens's teams moved into positions around Cedar Valley. They were creating control zones, modeling how a private military force could dominate civilian populations. "There are more strangers at the cafe," Rachel reported over the secure channel. "Expensive suits, military bearing. They're watching everything, taking notes on how Stevens's teams operate." "The demonstration has begun," Ben replied. "Every checkpoint, every patrol, every isolation measure, it's all designed to showcase how to control a population without raising alarms." By midday, Cedar Valley was in complete lockdown. Checkpoints monitored every entrance and exit, surveillance systems tracked every movement, and Stevens's teams maintained perfect tactical positions throughout the town, all under the guise of a federal investigation. "This is just phase 1, Ben observed, watching through his system as more specialized equipment was deployed. Stevens isn't just showing how to take control, he's proving how to maintain it. At the town hall, Harris took the next step, presenting evidence suggesting a broader criminal conspiracy. Her investigation now extended to local officials, providing justification for broader control measures. "We've uncovered links to international arms trafficking," she declared to the town's leaders. "For everyone's safety, federal authorities will be implementing additional security protocols." Through his surveillance feeds, Ben monitored the meeting, noting the reactions from Stevens's potential clients. They weren't just observing the tactical operations but were studying how to create a legal pretext for militarized civilian control. More communications intercepted, Daniels reported over the secure channel. Stevens is coordinating with other sites in his network. His plan is far larger than just Cedar Valley. As the afternoon wore on, the pattern became clearer. Every location in Stevens's network was implementing similar measures, constructing a framework for regional control using private military forces disguised as legitimate security operations. He's not just selling weapons or training, Ben realized. He's selling a complete system for occupation and sustained civilian control. Blackstone Ridge, arms smuggling, it was all groundwork for this larger scheme. As night fell, Stevens's demonstration moved into its next phase. Tactical teams began conducting security sweeps throughout the town, establishing patterns of civilian control and surveillance that could easily be replicated elsewhere. Stevens's clients are thoroughly impressed, Daniels reported, monitoring communications from the observation teams. He's showing them exactly what they want: seamless civilian control without the overt presence of military forces. Beneath the polished surface of Stevens's demonstration, Ben's counteroperation was quietly progressing. Every control measure, security protocol, and piece of equipment Stevens deployed was meticulously recorded and traced. "Keep tracking the supply chains," Ben instructed his team. "He has to source this equipment from somewhere. Every piece of hardware, every system he's showcasing, it all leads back to its origin." Before dawn, 3 black SUVs arrived at the Blackstone Ridge compound. Through his surveillance network, Ben identified the passengers, military officers from various nations, traveling under diplomatic cover. 12 high-level observers, Daniels confirmed over the secure channel. Representatives from nations grappling with insurgencies. They're here for more than just weapons. They want Stevens's entire civilian control system. From his farm, Ben observed as Harris's investigation provided the cover for the next phase of operations. Federal agents set up a command center at Cedar Valley's town hall, their activities seamlessly masking Stevens's militarized control measures. The teams are moving differently, Rachel reported over the secure line. More aggressive, like they're putting on a show. Stevens's demonstration escalated to active operations. His teams conducted coordinated security campaigns across Cedar Valley, demonstrating to potential clients how private military forces could effectively control civilian populations while maintaining plausible deniability. "You're required at the Federal Command Center," Harris informed him, arriving at his door flanked by an armed escort. "We have some questions about your international connections." The drive to Town Hall was a carefully staged event. Stevens's teams showcased their capabilities in civilian control, demonstrating checkpoint protocols and surveillance technologies. Every movement was designed to impress the observing clients. Inside the town hall, Ben maintained his role, a nervous but resilient farmer, while covertly monitoring operations. Through hidden sensors, the command center was equipped with advanced military communications systems, tactical displays, and everything necessary for regional control campaigns. These financial records, Harris pointed to the documents spread across the table, indicate connections to arms dealers in 3 different countries. "How do you explain this?" But more intriguing than her questions was the activity Ben observed in the building's secured areas. Stevens was showcasing advanced command and control systems, electronic warfare capabilities, everything required for private military operations. "Activity at the compound," Daniels reported. "They're preparing specialized equipment for the demonstration, high-grade military hardware that shouldn't exist outside official channels." Through hidden cameras, Ben watched as Stevens orchestrated the presentation. He wasn't just displaying weapons and tactical teams, he was unveiling the infrastructure needed to control populations without official oversight. Multiple signals detected, Ben noted as his covert surveillance tracked communications from the command center. They're coordinating with other locations in the network. This demonstration isn't just for Cedar Valley. By midday, the town had fully transformed into a model of private military control. Checkpoints regulated all movement, surveillance systems tracked every citizen, and tactical teams maintained complete coverage of key areas. "Clients are thoroughly impressed," Daniels confirmed. "Stevens is showing them exactly what they came for, civilian control without international scrutiny." Ben issued his next order: trace the origins of that equipment. Every piece they showcase has a supply chain. Track the manufacturers. As the day wore on, Stevens escalated the demonstration to include response capabilities. Tactical teams conducted coordinated drills throughout Cedar Valley, showcasing their ability to control and suppress civilian resistance swiftly and effectively. "Sir," Danielle's voice carried urgency over the secure line. "Satellite imagery shows increased activity at other network locations. They're not just demonstrating control, they're showing how to expand it across entire regions." Ben balanced maintaining his facade of a beleaguered farmer while analyzing the intelligence pouring in. The pattern was clear. Stevens wasn't just selling private military services, he was marketing a scalable model for private forces to systematically control civilian populations worldwide. Nightfall brought Stevens's demonstration to its dramatic climax. Beneath the cover of darkness, he showcased the full capabilities of his private military force to his prospective clients. Elite tactical teams executed complex urban warfare drills, demonstrating population control techniques and swift suppression of resistance. But Ben Carter, the farmer seemingly crushed by a federal investigation, was executing his own operation. Every demonstration, every capability Stevens flaunted, was carefully recorded and monitored. Stevens believed he was boasting about his private military empire, but in reality he was providing the evidence that would dismantle his entire network. "Prepare for the final phase," Ben instructed his team. Stevens has shown us everything. It's time for his performance to end in a way he'll never expect. At midnight, Stevens launched the concluding phase of his showcase. Tactical teams conducted synchronized operations across Cedar Valley, demonstrating how private military forces could assert total control over a civilian population. In his hidden command center, Ben Carter initiated his final counterstrike. All surveillance systems are fully operational, Daniels reported. Every device Stevens is demonstrating, every tactic his teams employ, is being recorded and analyzed. Ben watched Stevens's presentation unfold through his surveillance screens. In Stevens's command center, the man stood before tactical displays, explaining to his clients, foreign military officers, how his forces operated without government oversight. Our teams function under the guise of legitimate enterprises, Stevens assured them, using local criminal organizations as intermediaries. There's no direct government connection. Ben activated the first stage of his counter-operation. Hidden signal emitters began broadcasting frequencies that mimicked routine electronic interference, just enough to compel Stevens to deploy his most advanced communication systems. They're switching to backup systems, Daniels observed. Military-grade encryption, classified protocols, exactly what we need them to showcase. Rachel Harris arrived at Ben's farm with another tactical team. Her timing was impeccable, a calculated part of Stevens's demonstration of pressure and isolation techniques against targeted individuals. A final inspection, she announced her tone professional but smug. We need to document every piece of equipment, every building, every record. As Stevens's teams conducted their sweep, Ben's hidden systems meticulously documented their methods, equipment, and tactical procedures. Stevens thought he was demonstrating his capabilities, but he was actually revealing every stolen military secret in his arsenal. Multiple signals detected, Daniels reported. They're coordinating with other locations in the network. Stevens is showcasing how his private army can execute regional operations. Through hidden cameras, Ben observed the reactions of Stevens's clients. They were clearly impressed by the sophistication of the operation and the completeness of the civilian control system Stevens presented. By 3 a.m., the demonstration reached its peak. Stevens's teams executed complex urban warfare drills throughout Cedar Valley, demonstrating their ability to rapidly suppress any form of civilian resistance. Satellite imagery confirms similar demonstrations at other network locations, Daniels reported, urgency in his voice. They're showing clients how to establish control on a regional scale. While maintaining his facade, Ben analyzed the intelligence pouring in. The pattern was undeniable. Stevens wasn't just selling private military services, he was creating a replicable model for private forces to systematically control civilian populations worldwide. Finalize the data, Ben ordered as his hidden systems captured everything, every demonstration, every capability, every classified device. It's time for the world to see what's really happening in Cedar Valley. As dawn broke, Stevens concluded his presentation. His clients were thoroughly convinced, awestruck by the completeness of the private military system he offered. But Ben Carter, the farmer who appeared defeated, had completed his own operation. Every demonstration had been recorded. Every capability had been documented. Every classified device had been identified. Stevens believed he was selling a vision of privatized military power, but in reality he had exposed his entire network. All systems are ready, Daniels confirmed. One word, and every intelligence agency in the world will receive the evidence of Stevens's operation. No denials, no excuses, just proof that military secrets are being sold to foreign powers. Through his surveillance screens, Ben watched as Stevens accepted congratulations from his clients. The man was convinced of his perfect success, showcasing a private military empire while suppressing what he thought was a simple security breach. Not yet, Ben commanded. Let him complete his demonstration. Let him believe he has won completely. Sometimes the most effective weapon is letting your enemy achieve exactly what they desire. Ben's tone lowered as new data filled his screens. Stevens's presentation had revealed something unexpected, connections to higher echelons of power, to officials and agencies that had no business being involved in private military operations. This conspiracy was larger than anyone could have imagined, and Ben Carter, the seemingly powerless farmer, was about to expose it all. "Sir," Daniels said, unease evident in his voice. "If we reveal these connections, everything changes." "Exactly," Ben replied, resolute. "The entire system of military power and civilian control will be laid bare. That's the goal we've spent 10 years pursuing." As the first light of dawn broke over Cedar Valley, the town had been transformed. Stevens's private military force had established complete control, and his demonstration was a resounding success. But in his hidden command center, Ben Carter prepared to shatter the illusion Stevens had painstakingly built. "All surveillance data has been compiled," Daniels reported. "Every operation, every classified device, every connection to official entities. Once this is made public, there will be no covering it up." Through his monitoring systems, Ben watched Stevens conduct his final meeting. Stevens stood confidently before his clients in the command center, explaining how his private military system could be replicated anywhere in the world. Completely autonomous, Stevens assured the foreign military officers. "Our forces can establish population control without official oversight or accountability. Cedar Valley proves it." Ben initiated the first stage of his counterstrike. Hidden transmitters began broadcasting specialized frequencies, forcing Stevens's teams to deploy their most advanced countermeasures. "They're activating the entire system," Daniels noted. "Electronic warfare protocols, tactical networks, prototype weapons, everything sensitive is now being logged." Rachel Harris arrived at Ben's farm with an arrest team in tow. Her presence was the perfect capstone to Stevens's demonstration, showcasing how he dealt with potential security threats. "Mr. Carter," she announced formally, "you are being taken into federal custody pending an investigation into allegations of international arms trafficking." As Stevens's team executed the arrest, Ben's concealed systems documented every process, every piece of equipment, and every tactical method. Stevens believed he was demonstrating impeccable deniability, but in truth he was providing undeniable proof. "Multiple data streams detected," Daniels reported. "They're coordinating with other network sites, illustrating how this private army can dominate an entire region." Through hidden cameras, Ben observed Stevens's clients closely analyzing tactical displays. Stevens wasn't just selling private military services, he was offering a fully integrated system for unofficial forces to take over civilian populations worldwide. New vehicles arriving at the compound, Rachel's voice crackled through the secure channel. "They're unloading everything: prototype weapons, classified systems, hardware that officially doesn't exist." Ben monitored the activity while maintaining his facade. Stevens was revealing all his capabilities, exposing stolen military technologies. Each system unveiled provided further evidence of high-level corruption. "These connections run deeper than we anticipated," Daniels cautioned. "Military commanders, intelligence officials, government agencies, they're all implicated." The scale of the conspiracy became clearer as Ben analyzed the data. Stevens wasn't just running a private military operation, he was part of a systemic effort to privatize military power, transferring control from governments to private entities. "Prepare the primary data package," Ben ordered. "Every demonstration, every capability, every connection. It's time for the world to see who's really backing Stevens's private army." As his system compiled the evidence, new information surfaced. The network of connections extended far beyond military circles, reaching into realms of power that should never have been associated with private military operations. "If we expose these connections," Daniels warned, "we won't just bring down Stevens, we'll also reveal corruption at the highest levels of government and the military." "That's the point," Ben replied calmly. "This was never just about stopping one private military operation. It's about exposing the entire system that made it possible." Through his surveillance network, Ben watched Stevens accept congratulations from his clients. Stevens believed he had achieved the perfect victory, showcasing his private military capabilities while containing what he thought was a minor security leak. All systems are ready, Daniels confirmed. One word, and every major intelligence agency in the world will receive undeniable evidence of the entire operation. No denials, no covers, just proof that military power is being privatized at the highest levels. Ben Carter, the farmer who appeared broken by a federal investigation, had completed his true mission. Every demonstration had been recorded. Every capability had been tracked. Every connection had been uncovered. Stevens thought he was selling a vision of perfect privatized military power. Instead, he had provided the evidence to expose corruption across the entire military-industrial system. Not yet, Ben ordered as his team prepared to transmit the data. Wait for my signal. Let them finish their celebration, let them believe their victory is complete. The sun rose higher over Cedar Valley as both campaigns neared their ultimate confrontation. Stevens thought he was selling flawless military control. He didn't realize he was about to become the perfect example of why such control should never exist. Sometimes, the most effective weapon isn't strength or deception. Sometimes, it's simply showing the world the truth it was never meant to see. As Stevens's demonstration reached its zenith, Ben Carter launched the final stage of his decade-long operation. From his hidden command center, now relocated to a fallback position, he watched Stevens initiate the conclusion of what the man believed was his perfect showcase. "Sir," Daniels reported over the secure channel, "we've detected new flights, private jets landing at multiple airports. It's not just military clients, there are government officials arriving too." Ben tracked the flights via satellite images, identifying the arrivals as cabinet members, intelligence directors, and senior military commanders, all attending under diplomatic covers to observe Stevens's work. "They've come to see what they've invested in," Ben mused. "It's time for them to see exactly what they've bought." Rachel Harris orchestrated Ben's transfer into federal custody, her team adhering to flawless protocols as they escorted him to the command center. Every procedure demonstrated Stevens's supposed perfect control. "Multiple agencies are coordinating," Daniels observed. "FBI, CIA, military intelligence, they're all involved in this facade. The corruption runs through every level." Through hidden surveillance, Ben watched Stevens greet the high-ranking visitors. The man exuded confidence, proudly showcasing how his private military forces could control populations without accountability. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stevens addressed the officials and clients, "what you see in Cedar Valley is just the beginning. Our system can be deployed anywhere, providing complete deniability for privately executed military operations." Ben activated the primary countermeasure. Specialized signal transmitters began broadcasting frequencies that forced Stevens's security systems to reveal their full capabilities. "They're deploying everything," Daniels reported. "Prototype weapons, electronic warfare systems, tactical networks. None of this should exist outside official channels." The scale of the conspiracy became increasingly clear as Ben reviewed the data. Stevens wasn't just showcasing privatized military control, he was demonstrating how official power could be systematically transferred into private hands, how civilian oversight could be entirely eliminated. New signals detected. Rachel's voice came through the secure channel. "They're activating a central control system, something far larger than just Cedar Valley." Ben studied the communication traffic, noting how Stevens was coordinating with other nodes in his network. This wasn't just a demonstration of how to control a small town. It was a proof of concept for how private military forces could dominate an entire region. "Prepare the primary data package," Ben ordered. "Every demonstration, every capability, every connection. It's time to show the world who's truly behind this operation." But as the system compiled the evidence, more troubling patterns emerged. The web of corruption extended beyond military and intelligence spheres, reaching into levels of governance that should have ensured civilian oversight. "If we expose these connections," Daniels warned, "we won't just bring down Stevens and his private army. We'll reveal corruption running through the entire military and civilian oversight systems." "That's the point," Ben replied, his voice steady. "This was never just about stopping one private military operation. It's about exposing the entire network that made it possible." Through the surveillance feeds, Ben watched Stevens accept congratulations from government officials. Stevens believed he had achieved the perfect success, demonstrating privatized military power while containing what he thought was a minor security leak. All systems are ready, Daniels confirmed. One word, and every major intelligence organization and oversight committee will receive irrefutable evidence of this conspiracy. No denials, no cover-ups, just proof that military power has been privatized at the highest levels. Initiate the final phase, Ben commanded. Let them finish their celebration. Let them believe their victory is complete. Then, we show them what 10 years of preparation has accomplished. The midday sun cast its harsh light over Cedar Valley as both campaigns reached their defining moments. Stevens thought he was realizing his dream of privatized military supremacy. He didn't realize he was about to become the clearest example of its greatest danger. A perfect demonstration, Stevens declared to his audience, confidently gesturing toward Ben. A security breach contained, a civilian community controlled, all with no traceable connection to official agencies. Through hidden devices, Ben tracked a convergence of signals directed towards Cedar Valley, news helicopters, federal agents, military oversight committees, all responding to anonymous reports of unusual activity in a small Montana town. Sir, Daniels's voice was a low whisper over the secure channel. Surveillance confirms the presence of high-value targets, cabinet members, military commanders, intelligence directors, all the people who made Stevens's operation possible. Ben allowed himself a slight smile as Harris escorted him to stand before the officials. 10 years of preparation had led to this moment. Every piece was in place, every system ready, every connection poised to be exposed. Mr. Carter, Stevens called out, his voice brimming with confidence. You've helped us prove something remarkable, how private military forces can control civilian populations while maintaining perfect deniability. Actually, General, Ben replied, his voice suddenly carrying the weight and authority of a seasoned commander. You've helped me prove something far more important. The shift in Ben's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. Gone was the anxious farmer. Standing before them now was a battle-hardened Delta Force commander who had spent 10 years orchestrating this moment. What is this? Stevens demanded, but his voice betrayed a growing unease. This, Ben declared with quiet intensity, is Operation Oversight, a plan 10 years in the making, designed to expose not just your private military scheme, but the corrupt system that made it possible. Through the hidden cameras, Ben watched the shock ripple across the faces of the officials. The perfect demonstration of privatized military power had become the perfect evidence of their corruption. You don't understand what you're up against, Stevens warned, signaling to his security team. No evidence will be admissible. No investigation will ever proceed. You're wrong, Ben replied calmly. In the last 12 hours, everything in Cedar Valley has been broadcast live to oversight committees, intelligence agencies, and news outlets around the globe. Impossible, Harris interjected, her professional demeanor beginning to crack. Your security systems, Ben continued, were exactly what we needed you to demonstrate. Every countermeasure you activated, every classified system you revealed, every connection you exposed, they all serve as proof that military power is being privatized at the highest levels. The command room erupted into chaos as the officials grasped the implications. Their phones began to ring simultaneously, calls from oversight committees, intelligence agencies, and media organizations demanding explanations. You didn't just expose yourself, General, Ben pressed on, his voice cutting through the commotion. You exposed everyone who helped you execute this operation, every military commander who supplied classified technology, every intelligence official who ensured deniability, every government leader who turned a blind eye. Stevens reached to activate emergency protocols, but Ben's next words froze him in place. Don't bother with the kill switches. Your entire network has already been infiltrated, every site, every operation, every connection, all of it is being exposed as we speak. Through the surveillance feeds, Ben watched identical scenes unfold at Stevens's other facilities. Private military campaigns across the globe were being unmasked, their ties to official agencies laid bare, their unchecked use of force documented and proven. Federal response teams will arrive in 3 minutes, Daniels reported. Military oversight committees have ordered immediate intervention. The entire network is collapsing. Ben Carter, no longer the farmer feigning helplessness, stood in the center of the command room as his years-long campaign reached its apex. 10 years of meticulous preparation had culminated in this moment, when the truth about privatized military power could no longer be denied or hidden. "You're finished," Stevens growled, though his voice trembled more with fear than menace. "No, General," Ben responded calmly. "We're just getting started." The sound of approaching helicopters filled the sky as federal teams converged on Cedar Valley. Stevens's flawless demonstration of privatized military power had become the ultimate example of why such power should never exist. Without oversight, by the following dawn, Cedar Valley was unrecognizable once more. Federal teams had secured the town, and Stevens, along with his entire command structure, had been taken into custody. Overhead, news helicopters circled, capturing the full scale of the operation as it became a national spectacle. Standing on the porch of his farmhouse, Ben Carter surveyed the fruits of 10 years of effort finally coming to light. "The final data is being compiled," Daniels reported, approaching with a tablet displaying streams of information. 17 high-ranking military commanders, 12 intelligence directors, 4 cabinet members, all implicated in the privatized military network. Stevens was merely the visible tip of a much larger conspiracy. Through the remaining surveillance systems, Ben monitored the nationwide response. Similar scenes were unfolding at other locations as Stevens's entire network was dismantled and exposed. "Blackstone Ridge was just the beginning," Rachel remarked, bringing coffee to the porch. "Every gang, every criminal organization they used as a front, it's all being laid bare now." Ben nodded, watching federal teams collect evidence from the compound. Stevens thought he was building something unprecedented, private military power free from accountability. But instead, he's shown the world exactly why such power should never exist. Mary Collins approached the farmhouse, representing the stunned townsfolk. "All this time," she said, her voice filled with amazement, "you were never just a farmer." "No, Mary," Ben replied gently. "The farming was real. Sometimes the best disguise isn't something you pretend to be, but something you truly become." Through secure channels, Ben received updates on the operation's ripple effects. Military oversight committees began launching investigations, intelligence agencies exposed networks of corruption, and news outlets unveiled the full scope of the privatized military conspiracy. "Sir," Daniels reported, analyzing the latest data. "They've uncovered similar operations in other countries. Stevens's demonstration hasn't just exposed corruption in the U.S., it's revealed a global network of privatized military power." Ben watched as Harris was led into a federal transport vehicle. For the first time, the professional confidence she had exuded completely crumbled. The woman who had once been a military intelligence expert never imagined her flawless investigation was part of a far greater operation. "What happens now?" Rachel asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "Now," Ben replied, "we make sure this never happens again. Privatized military power, unchecked force, corruption at the highest levels, they've all thrived because no one could see them for what they were." Through the remaining surveillance feeds, Ben monitored the final stages of the campaign. Stevens's classified technology was being seized, his private military forces disbanded, and the web of corruption brought into the light. "Multiple oversight committees are requesting you testify," Daniels noted. "They want to know how a Delta Force commander managed to expose what no major agency could." "Tell them the truth," Ben replied. "Sometimes the most effective operator isn't the one with the strongest force or the most advanced technology. Sometimes it's the person willing to spend 10 years underestimated, waiting for the exact moment to reveal the truth." As federal teams continued processing evidence, Ben Carter began the slow transition back to his real life, not just the guise of farming, but the genuine life he had built in Cedar Valley. "Will you stay?" Mary asked, her voice tinged with concern. "This is my home," Ben said simply. "It always has been, even when it was also my mission." Through secure channels, Ben received the final update. Oversight committees were enforcing new controls on military power, intelligence agencies were dismantling networks of corruption, and the entire system of privatized militarization was being deconstructed. Operation complete, Daniels reported for the last time. 10 years of work, and we changed everything. Ben Carter, no longer needing to pretend to be anyone else, stood on his farmhouse porch and watched the sun rise over Cedar Valley. The town had changed, not just because of Stevens's demonstration or his exposure, but because of the undeniable truth that sometimes the greatest power doesn't lie in force or control, but in the revelation of truth, delivered by a farmer who was far more than he seemed. This story serves as a powerful reminder that strength often comes not from overwhelming might or advanced technology, but from patience and the ability to wait for the right moment. Have you ever faced a challenge that required calm determination and perseverance? If so, share your story in the comments. It might inspire someone who needs it. If this story resonated with you, share it with your friends to spread the message of integrity and resilience. Thank you for taking the time to follow along. Let's continue making positive changes, no matter how small the actions might seem. These stories are collected and refined to convey deep human values in life, with the support of AI. If there are any shortcomings, we hope for your understanding. Wishing you peace and happiness in your journey ahead.